Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Fitter and Faster Coach's Corner. I'm your host, as always, Mike Murray. Today, I am thrilled to have my friend, a mentor, a very recognizable face in the USA Swimming National Championship pool decks, maybe visited some of your clubs over the last 12 years, and really, quite unfortunately, a Boston Red Sox fan, the incomparable Coach Mark Hesse. Mark, thanks for agreeing to hang out with me on the Coach's Corner today.
Thanks, Mike. You had to bring up the baseball, right?
Well, listen, I have a running bet with Matt Davis right now from Hudson Explorers. If the Indians beat the Yankees, I have to go out there and coach with him a couple days. And then if the Yankees beat the Indians, he's coming out here to the Finger Lakes.
Well, I know who I'm rooting for.
the Windians.
No doubt.
Coach Hesse has over 27 years of coaching experience as a club coach at Fort Washington Township, Sugar Creek Swim Club, Fort Worth Area Swim Team, Mission Bay, and Burke Barracudas. Mark is an ASCA Level 5 certified coach, has placed athletes in Olympic trial semifinals and on USA Swimming's national junior team. Mark, when I first met you, you know, one of the things that you told me, you said, "Now, Mike, you got a lot of enthusiasm, but let's learn to channel it to different places." And that's been a really important piece of advice for me, you know, going through my own development as a coach. But what were some of your favorite moments about working at USA Swimming and getting to travel and meet so many different athletes and coaches around our country?
Well, you know, to pick favorite moments, gosh, that'd be really hard. You know, I was there 8 years, probably visited 300 clubs. Obviously, every year, junior nationals, doing the video review. So many great experiences. I think just the overall fun of the job, being able to talk about swimming, talk about how to get better with coaches, with athletes on a daily basis. And really, no 2 days were ever the same because every pool deck's different. Even if a coach was looking for the same set of presentations to their athletes or their coaching staff, because it was a different group of people, a different environment, it made the experience different. And I think, you know, one of the most exciting things was the opportunity to work with some, you know, of our current, you know, superstar athletes when they were just kind of breaking out. I had the good fortune to spend some time at the Newburgh Sea Creatures working with Lily King, watching her development. Obviously, spending time, you know, working with you all and seeing Michaela Sargent's growth. The kid out of Austin, Sean Grisham, got to see him when he was still living in El Paso, you know, gangly 11, 12-year-old. But you could just see that there was something there, that he had the ability to continue to get better. And just to watch those athletes kind of have their breakthroughs is so exciting, and to feel like, you know, that I contributed in some way to that certainly is a great feeling, and makes all the, I guess, the hassles of travel that's involved with that job worthwhile. So it was a lot of fun and a great time working with USA Swimming.
I know that for our athletes, they were always excited to see you guys, you know, after you made a club visit. They were always excited to see you in video review. And I think familiar faces is the name of the game, right? As they develop, they get to know people as they start to progress. And then that hierarchy of people just continues to grow and grow and grow. And their comfortability in the sport, I think, has a lot to do with that. So it was such a great portion of USA Swimming. And I'm excited to see what they do moving forward when we get through this and we can start to put this behind us. We have a topic, Mark, that so many people are interested in our profession, and that's the idea of remaining curious throughout your career as a coach. What's something right now that Mark Hesse is really curious about? You know, you probably had a little bit more time lately with the pandemic. You know, you're moving into some new ventures. What are the things that you're really curious about?
Well, I'm really curious what my next step is in my careers, because there's some options out there and some things to look at. So I'm curious about that, about what's the best fit and where I can really contribute the most, you know, to the sport, to other people. So I'm curious about that. And when I talk about curiosity as a coach, to me, it's about the gap, right? The gap between where we are and where the athlete or the program's potential is. And what's in that gap and how do we bridge that gap? What are the things we need to be doing today, you know, to start us on the journey there? And I look at, you know, when I look at, you know, kind of international performance, I look at, okay, where are the opportunities in events in USA Swimming, right? You know, people want to talk about, well, is Caleb gonna go, you know, under 21.5 or something like that, right? Or is he going to go a 20 point in the 50 and, you know, 45 in the 100? You know, what's possible there? And for me, I don't look at those events so much as I look at like the men's 100 breast, right? When are we going to get a guy in the 57s, right? We're chasing 56. So how do we get to 56, 55, 57? What's holding us back? Other events like women's 2 fly, right? Where Mary T would final at pretty much every nationals in her baggy nylon suit. And obviously she's an anomaly, but we haven't made a ton of progress, right? Except when the rubber suits were in vogue. So I look at those opportunities kind of in a global way, but then specific opportunities with the athletes, with the program that you're in, you know, what's missing? And I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves. And I think we don't ask ourselves often enough. Like when we get a group of athletes at the beginning of the year, what's the most important thing that they need to make a breakthrough? And a lot of times the kind of the historical, cultural response was, well, they need to work harder. They need to do more work, right? And I know you're a works guy, and work does work, but that's not always the answer, right? It could be, hey, maybe they need more confidence, right? And so what's going to give them that confidence? Part of it is some training for sure, but maybe they need to learn how to be confident. I think that's one thing that I found with athletes, that that lack of confidence when they move outside of kind of their comfort zone of competition, right? Where's that sense of urgency? And maybe it's, you know, I hear coaches say, well, this kid needs to be more dedicated. Okay, what are you doing to teach them dedication? Other than telling them, you need to be more dedicated. You're not dedicated enough. That's not helping the athlete get better. So it's really taking the time to assess the needs of the athletes and create a needs-centered, you know, coaching paradigm that you can use to help those athletes get better. So that's kind of where my curiosity is I wonder what, if we did this, what would happen?
Sure. And so critical to think that way as club coaches. What am I doing in my workout every day that's going to fill some of those emotional needs, some of those confident needs? So what are some ways, or what are some strategies that you've seen some of the great coaches in our sport incorporate into their workout to kind of deliver some of those things to the athletes?
Well, I think you've got to look at the time you spend before practice, maybe some of the time you spend in dry land as well, where you have the ability to communicate, you know, a little bit more with the athletes. Their faces aren't in the water, right? You have a little bit longer time period. And that's the opportunity where you can get to know your athletes. And I think one thing that the best coaches do is they do take the time to know their athletes. Pull a kid out of practice and don't worry about that they're missing, you know, 8 100s or, you know, 1,500 or 2,000 of a workout. To spend some time understanding what their goals are, what are they striving for. We often assume, I mean, I would assume every kid that shows up at practice wants to get better. But I think a lot of times as coaches, especially those coaches that have lofty goals, right? We assume every kid wants to be an Olympian. And that's probably not fair to those kids. So we've got to take the time to get to know them. So, you know, going through a goal setting process with your athletes, whether it's worksheets, but there needs to be a conversation, a follow-up to kind of understand their why and to understand what they're capable of right now, and then what's that gap. And then as coaches, we've got to communicate, okay, if you want to go from here to here, these are the steps we need to take. Can you commit to that? And then we've got to judge the athletes or hold the athletes accountable to, okay, you said you wanted to get here. These are the things we said we were going to focus on. Are you doing that? And ask that question on a regular basis and force the athletes into the self-assessment. And I think that's such a key. I know, I think back to the first visit I did with you at Victor, and we were talking about your virtual club championship scores, right? And you had good IM scores in freestyle, breaststroke, backstroke, everything looked good. And then there's this butterfly, and you were like at 3% of your points were from butterfly. And I go, what's going on with your fly, right? It just didn't fit in with everything else. And you said to me, well, I don't know, we're doing a lot of it, so I'm not sure what's going on. And so, you know, we spent some time talking about that and watching practice. It was, yeah, they were doing a lot of fly. It just wasn't very good butterfly. So it was that idea of, hey, they're not ready for 1050s. They might be ready for 625s of great fly. And then when they get really good at 625s, let's go to 1025s, then let's go to 550s. So making that those progressive steps. And I think sometimes it takes an outside eye. Yeah. You know, I think the roles could have easily been reversed, and you come in and watch my practice, and it would be obvious to you right away what it was. It wasn't some special skill that necessarily I had, but having that outside eye to look at it. So it's important to, you know, maybe bring in a mentor, or, you know, if it's somebody from USA Swimming, or even have your assistant coaches who don't normally work with your group come in and watch your group, and you spend some time observing them, because we develop blind spots, right? We think what we're doing is going to eventually work, right? But we don't see I guess the opportunities to make adjustments to it, because we believe in what we're doing, but sometimes it's just not fine-tuned enough.
There's no doubt about that. And I really like the idea of having different coaches come in and watch your workout, especially coaches, you know, throughout the season, it can get really long being with your group all the time. And as I've gotten older, you start to realize the value in that. And even having site coaches change sites, I think it's really impactful. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. The outside eye is so important.
I think if you have a large enough staff to move people around, it's good to do. You know, not so much that it's different every day, but
Right.
it's easy for the kids to get stale, and it's easy for the coach to get stale. And I think that's, and we can learn, right? If you're used to coaching, the very fastest senior kids at futures, juniors, national level, spend a day or a couple days down coaching the 8 and unders, you're gonna get recharged or your eyes open to some different things that will apply to those older athletes.
There's a lot less cynicism down there too in those groups.
No doubt, no doubt.
One of the things, Mark, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, we all have a different educational start to our journey as a coach. What are some of the things that you did as a young coach to kind of supplement what you were learning on deck?
Well, it's kind of funny. I got exposed to the American Swim Coaches Association pretty early on, actually before I even started coaching, because I was working, this is when I was in college at Georgetown. I had a part-time job as a lifeguard, right? And the head coach of the team was also the aquatics director there. And he would get his mailings from ASCA and he would just leave them laying out. And, on my lifeguarding break, I'd pick them up and read them. I guess that's where the curiosity comes in. So that was kind of an interesting early exposure for me. And I think I learned from every coach that I swam for. I think, and then I've learned from every coach I've had the opportunity to work with. And I was so fortunate early in my career to, and I look back on it and I go, I don't know, it was just dumb luck that I ended up with this. The first kind of club coaching job I had, I was coaching and working as the assistant pool manager alongside Pete Morgan, right? Ed Moses' coach. This is before Ed, but Pete had already been coaching for a while, so there's a Hall of Fame coach, and I could ask him questions about how he planned workouts. I could watch how he interacted with his kids and different things he emphasized in practice. Then I had the great fortune to be hired down at Mission Bay and work with Mark Schubert and Jack Roach and Larry Leibowitz. I mean, all great coaches with different styles and different perspectives. And down in the diving, we had Ron O'Brien coaching Greg Louganis and Michelle Mitchell, so you could see that. And other great coaches there. Andy Broido, who is an amazing swim school, learn to swim instructor, and I learned so much from her. And then I had the opportunity to spend a couple months picking Bud McAllister's brain. And then Jack Nelson, right? So I've got 4 Hall of Fame coaches, plus Jack Roach, Larry Leibowitz, and all these others that I've had the opportunity to work with. And I feel so fortunate that I could learn from them. And you learn from observing and being around other coaches. You learn the things that you want to do and emulate, and you also learn maybe some things that aren't going to work for me and my personality. We don't want to. I think being a copycat of another coach is you lose that authenticity, right? You've got to bring some of the information you gather from observing them and meld it with your personality and your beliefs as a coach. And that's where you become successful. So I had that exposure to ASCA, started going to the ASCA clinics as soon as I, was coaching club, and then had these great mentors, that I can still am comfortable to call on today. Those that are still around and alive, to get feedback from and share ideas with. So I encourage coaches to seek out mentors if they're not there on your staff, right? Go up to them on a pool deck or in the hospitality room, or offer to buy them lunch or a cup of coffee, and have those conversations. And I think that was one of the great things about what the sport development group at USA Swimming does, sending the performance development and the program development consultants out, because it's kind of the built-in another set of eyes and mentorship. We need more of that. We need more of that mentoring. And I would challenge the experienced coaches out there to, to kind of offer yourself up as a mentor and as a listening board and a sounding board for the young coaches out there.
It's so important. And I think there are so many young coaches who initially feel, I don't know how to approach some of these titans, some of these legends in the sport when you get to that level. And it's as simple as just going up and asking a question in the hospitality room. Once you make that first breakthrough, it becomes a lot easier. And I think, going back to what you said about ASCA, I think, it was so important early in my career to get to the point to where, you were doing the certification courses, but through the certification courses, there were so many other things that you could follow up on. If you wanted to learn more about physiology, if you wanted to learn more about the business side, and that curious mind as a young coach has to continue on in your development if you're ever going to get anywhere. And as we sit here and I'm talking with you, I notice Coach Wooden's pyramid of success behind you. What role has that played in Mark Hesse's philosophy as a coach?
Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success, in the book, They Call Me Coach. I read that really early on in my early 20s, and it really resonated with me. His attitude, his devotions to principle-centered coaching. And I've used the pyramid with so many of the teams I've worked with and coached over the years as kind of the foundation for what we talked about and what we value. And so really he's a huge touchstone to me. And one of his most famous quotes is, "It's what I learned after I knew it all that's made the difference." Right? So that idea of that never-ending journey of learning. And I know there's been some studies done of kind of the great coaches, and one of the key common denominators that's been identified with the Coach Woodens, the Mike Krzyzewskis, the Pat Head Summits, the Vince Lombardis, is that they're always trying to learn. They're always looking for new ideas, better ideas, ways to synthesize, other people's ideas with their own to create a better experience for their athletes. And that's really inspired me, I think, and why I'm so, curious and so committed to this idea of lifelong learning. And I think going outside of swimming to seek out knowledge from other coaches of other sports, from great leaders in business, from different disciplines out there. You can always bring something back into your swimming and into your coaching. Just studying nature and watching movement, right? Watching a cheetah run, watching an otter move through the water, right? We can learn different things and maybe different images that we can use with our swimmers to help them understand what they need to do.
No doubt about it. And using some different dynamics to bring back to swimming from other sports, other interests and things like that. It keeps things loose for you. and we don't get this hyper-focused mind that doesn't have the ability to operate outside of the sport of swimming.
Absolutely.
So many of the great ideas, I think, in coaching in the last, decade have really come from some outside influences. And I think it's so important to note that, and to understand that. One of the things that, you've always talked about is creating the coach-athlete relationship and being curious about who your athletes are. I had Greg Perini on last week from Denison, and he certainly knows something about successful people. And he said one of the things that he changed early in his career was he stopped looking at the 4-year window to coach a person, and he started looking at the 40-year window. And I thought that was incredibly insightful. Talk a little bit about, some of the things that you've seen that in coaching that have changed in terms of the way that we interact with our swimmers and we create the partnership that we hope to have with all of our athletes.
Well, I think it's something that I didn't come to naturally. I think I always had good relationships with my athletes, but in my early part of my career, I was much more of a teller and a yeller than I was a listener and I guess an inspirer. And I think that was a shift that I made the more experience I had in dealing with athletes and seeing some athletes who, by everything that they did, should have been more successful. And maybe there were some places, at least as swimmers, and there were some places where I could have been a little more understanding, listen to them a little bit more. I think listening to our athletes, whether they're 5 or 6 years old or 36 years old, I think is an important part of becoming a successful coach and really becoming that athlete-centered and needs-centered coach. If we don't understand who it is we're coaching, right? We're not coaching swimmers, we're coaching people. And every single one of those people is different. And we have to take the time to start to understand what motivates them, what they're interested in, what they're excited about, and what they want to accomplish, and give them an opportunity to voice that, and also to understand, I think especially important, the things that they're scared of, right? The things that keep them from really reaching their potential. And that takes time. You have to develop that trust. And I think we've seen coaches start to focus more. I think the great coaches have always focused on those relationships. You look at Eddie Reese, right? Put people first. The swimming will take care of itself. If you put people first and take care of others, the swimming will take care of itself. Dave Salo always says, it's not about what I write on the whiteboard. It's about the interaction with the athletes when they're doing what's on the whiteboard, and how I'm processing what they're doing, how they're processing what they're doing, and then the interaction between our interpretations of that. And I think that's, Terry McKeeve is another coach that I think spends a lot of time getting to know her athletes. And it takes, you've got to be confident in yourself too, and comfortable in yourself. So you got to get to know yourself. The U.S. Olympic Committee and Paralympic Committee came out a few years ago with a document called the Quality Coaching Framework, and they go, there are 3 areas of knowledge that are essential for coaches, and one is obviously the professional knowledge of the sport, right? What are great swimming strokes, right? What are the components of training physiology? But then you have to have the interpersonal knowledge, right, of how to relate to other people, and then the intrapersonal knowledge, how to understand yourself, what motivates you, and engaging in the reflective process of, okay, how did that workout go? If that workout didn't go the way I wanted, why didn't it, right? Okay, or if it was a great workout, why was it a great workout? It's not necessarily, again, what was written in the workout, but what created the energy in the group that allowed that to be such a great workout. So we've got to spend some time reflecting, and Coach Wooden, again, one of the things he said, the hardest thing to know is yourself, right? And if we can model that, right, our athletes then can learn that as well, because really they're on a journey of self-discovery. I think it was Aristotle that said you can't teach anybody anything. They have to discover it for themselves, right? And that's what our athletes are doing. We're just the guides for them. And again, that's not something that I learned early on in my career. And I often think, if I could go back and coach this swimmer, here are the things that I would do differently. Unfortunately, we don't get those do-overs. Yeah, so I think that's the whole key to being a successful coach, is those relationships, because that's what allows us to be a transformational coach rather than just a transactional coach where it's all about the wins and losses, the times, the cuts, who makes a team, blah, blah, blah. It's all only focused on the results. The transformational coach is focused on the process of development of not only the athlete, but that when you talk about that 40-year window, right? Development of the person. And I forget which coach it was. I don't know if it was Coach Wooden, but Coach was being interviewed and asked, well, what do you think about, was this year's team a success? And he said, talk to me in 20 years. That's when I'll know, right? And for me, one of the greatest joys is when I get those communications. Now they're generally via Facebook or Instagram or something like that, where an athlete will say, hey, I just want to, say thank you for what you did, with us X number of years ago. I had a guy who's a very successful dentist in the DC area reached out and he goes, I don't know if you remember me, you coached me 34 years ago, when we were at this summer league team. And I just want to thank you for believing in me and, the lessons that you taught me. And I'm like, hell, I was,
Just
26 at the time. I'm not sure I knew what the heck I was doing, but somehow there was learning that went on, and there was an exchange of values and communication that made an impact. And those are the things that are super gratifying to me, more so than, any championships or kids making a team kind of thing.
One of the things that you said to me when I was a younger coach 10 years ago, you would say, Mike, at the end of the day, and I've always been a big numbers guy, and you and I have talked about that and analytics and everything. You'd say swimming is a vehicle, right? Swimming is a vehicle to teach all of these other things. And I really believe that when I started to make that more of the priority, I saw the athletes make a change in their performance in a positive direction without it being the primary focus. There's X's and O's that are the primary focus every day, but I think in our program and culturally from now on, it's about, what are we doing for these people? What are we doing for these parents? How are we educating? And I think that's a great point, and I'm glad you talked about it. And it touched on a couple of the bullet points that I sent you for pre-production, and it moved us into this question. And this is one of the more esoteric questions that we have. And we've talked about it a little bit. You actually used the word authentic. And I called you a couple months ago, I think, and I said, I talked to Jack Roach this morning, and I feel like I talked to Buddha.
Jack will do that to you.
He said, and I have to read this because I want to do it justice, but he said, Mike, true clarity is thought between spaces, and being authentic is the greatest accomplishment we can achieve in life. And I've thought about that almost every day since he said that to me in June. And I'm still trying to figure out, am I moving in that direction? And I'm trying to take notice of those things. So when you think about being authentic, I think it's tied to being present in the moment when you're talking to your athletes. What are some ways that coaches can be more aware of whether or not they're present in the moment?
I think, so there's a couple of ways to answer that. I think being present in the moment is one of our greatest challenges as human beings, because we've got these great computers up here, right? And they're always assessing the past, and we're trying to control the future. And the reality is we have no control over the future except by what we do in this moment. And I think that is the greatest lesson that I've learned probably in the last 10 years is that we do need to stay focused in this moment. So to me, it's about listening to the athlete, and listening not only with your ears and your brain, but listening with your eyes and with your heart to what they're trying to communicate to you. And listening to understand them. I mean, it goes back to the old Stephen Covey's, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So listening to understand rather than listening to respond, because until we understand, our response is not going to be authentic. It's going to be what we think is important, not necessarily what the athlete needs or thinks is important at that time. And it's not easy to get to that space. It's not easy to get that space on a pool deck in a swim meet when you've got kids in the next heat, right? And you're either super excited because it was a great performance, or you're frustrated because it wasn't a great performance. So again, you have to take the emphasis off the performance and put it on the process, and be in the moment as much as you can, and develop that space where the athletes feel comfortable sharing. So it's so hard to be judgment free. And you bring up Jack, and Jack to me has always been one of the least judgmental people that I've known, and the most open to listening and learning from every experience. And I think that's where it links back to curiosity, right? We need to learn from every experience. We preach that to our athletes, right? They've got to learn from every practice. They've got to learn from every race. Well, we've got to learn from that race as well. And we've got to learn from the athlete what went on in that race. So I think that, to me, the listening is so important. And then when I think about being in the moment at workout, right? When you're watching a set, you've given the kids a set and they're all off doing it. Really easy for the mind to wander away from that. Think about whether it's you're thinking about something swimming related or non-swimming related, you're not in the moment. And Bill Boomer, I remember him at the ASCA clinic a couple of years ago. He said, make sure you see what you're watching, right? So you've got to be in that moment to be able to interpret what's going on in the pool, and then be able to provide appropriate feedback or adjustments to what's going on. right? Just because you've written a great set, as soon as the kids leave the wall, it's out of your control, right? They're going to do what they're going to do. And sometimes you've got to stop and reframe it with them, right? Or sometimes you got to stop and say, okay, we're not ready for that. Let's readjust and do this. Or sometimes when everything's clicking, all you're doing is being a cheerleader, right? Yes, keep doing what you're doing. You're on point, right? And always be aware of the kids that maybe are struggling and give them that little extra encouragement. But you've got to, it's that idea of seeing again to understand, right? Not seeing to judge, oh, they're making the interval, that's great. This kid's not, oh, that's Jimmy. He never tries on, breaststroke sets, right? Okay, so you label Jimmy a breaststroke loser. How the heck is he ever going to get good enough in his IM if you don't do something to change your perception and their perception of what's required in breaststroke?
That's such a
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. No, it did. It touched on everything that we wanted to know. That dynamic that you're talking about where, you could just as easily focus on something else, but you have to be able to recognize those moments where you need to jump in and teach or inspire or care. I think those are the three things that I'm looking for. Is this a moment where I need to care about what's happening because this workout is garbage right now? There might be something happening with this person. Maybe this is a care moment. Another time you might see that, barnyard technique, and that's a teachable moment. And then another time someone's crushing it, and there's your inspirational moment. So being present and being able to see those things, recognize and make that change is super important. This question, Mark, you knew is coming because this is kind of an underlining theme this year on Coach's Corner. And one of the biggest aspects of our profession that we're starting to talk a lot more about, and that's self-care for coaches. I think to function as a curious coach, to be able to be in the mind space to evolve and learn, you have to be in a good place. So over the course of your years at USA Swimming and as a coach yourself, I know that you think that this is an incredibly important component to being a great coach. Talk to me a little bit about self-care and taking care of yourself and coaches' well-being.
Yeah, it is so important. And especially as we, if we're in this career and we want to continue in this career for a long time, to be able to recognize when we're taking care of ourselves and when we're not. And I think when I was a younger coach, I did a really, really good job when I was single. Yeah, I got enough sleep. I did some things to take care of myself. I exercised. I did all that. I had more energy, right? And then as I got a little bit further on, I think I got away from that wellness aspect. Started not getting as much sleep, maybe not taking care of myself, exercising as much, right? And then, you get married, you have a family, now you've got other people you've got to take care of, right? And they're drawing on your energy and your time, and you've got to find a way to serve all your different roles that you are, and you can't let one role dominate for an extended period of time, because then you're just digging yourself into a hole. So I think that's where that self-awareness and that ability to reflect, and also that ability to have some close friends, whether it's coaching colleagues or friends outside of the sport, or your significant other, or maybe your family, brothers, sisters, mom, dad, who can give you that honest feedback when you start down you know, start to head kind of towards the edge. Because it doesn't happen. I think very rarely does it happen, you know, in the snap of a finger that, you know, there's a lot of signs along the way. So it's being able to be self-aware. I think the curiosity part, you know, to bring it back to that thread, I think having outside interests, and being curious about some other things will in some ways energize you, even though people may see them as a distraction, right? A distraction is good if it takes your mind off of swimming 24/7. And I know there are coaches out there that think you should be all in 24/7. To me, I've found that doesn't work. And I don't think it's sustainable. And we've got to learn to let go. And it's not it's of the little stresses, right? It's not the major stressors that kill us. It's the little stressors, right? That just pile up. And if you're constantly thinking about, okay, where was Billy today? He wasn't at practice. Or why did, you know, this kid not have a good swim? Or, you know, hey, I've got to do this administrative task that I've been putting off, and now it's like on top of me and I got to get it done, right? Because I was whatever, you know, I let it slip away, right? Or I haven't spent time communicating effectively with the parents of my athletes, and now there's issues because of that poor communication. And those things, those little stressors build up, and all of a sudden, you know, you look up and you're 8 feet underground, you know, trying to scramble out of the hole. And then you start to make, I think we start to make poor decisions, right? When we're under that pressure and under that stress, and that can create a whole new set of challenges for us. So again, that being self-aware, having outside interests, you know, making sure that you are that you're at least a little bit smart about your diet and your rest, and then having sounding boards and people that you can rely on to give you an accurate assessment of where you're at and when you're kind of over the edge.
I think, Mark, that this right now is at an absolute point of critical mass for coaches. We here in Rochester, just to make it work with our 188 athletes, you know, we're on deck right now from anywhere between 1 o'clock in the afternoon and 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, running Saturday and Sunday, just to give kids a chance to swim. Sure. And I think for coaches, and I did not do this well in my career starting out 15 years ago, you have to educate your parents on why it's important for you to have nights off. I mean, there are not a lot of people in the world who can work 6 to 7 days. And when you talk about October, November, December, January, February, March for coaches, you're probably 2 weekends of the month. You're there all day, every day.
Absolutely.
Monday through Sunday. So, you know, I think what's important for, you know, parents, and we have a lot of parents who watch this show and parents who are board members. You have to remember that a coaching staff, especially the head coach and the assistants, they need days and nights off. And, you know, you were very adamant when I was younger, telling me to say, like, it's not the end of the world if Coach Mike can't be on deck tonight. In fact, it's probably good that somebody else is working in there and getting some time with the kids. So talk a little bit about how you educated maybe some parents throughout your journey or in your journeys with USA Swimming. Talk to me about how you spoke to boards and coaching staffs about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that especially young coaches face, or even sometimes some more experienced coaches, is being advocates for ourselves. And we you know, I think the majority of us get into coaching is because we want to help kids get better, right? Get better as athletes, get better as people. And that passion and that commitment, right, can become all consuming if we allow it to be. And we've got to advocate for ourselves to have time off, to have a weekend off. And a weekend off doesn't just mean no meets. It means, you know, somebody covers maybe Friday night practice and Saturday practice for you, and you take a 3-day weekend and go camping or whatever. Just, you know, do whatever it is that relaxes you and recharges you. I think it was Greg Troy that this was probably maybe 20 years ago, and he was probably 20 years into his coaching career when he said this to me. He goes, you know, I started taking a 3-day weekend and forcing my staff to take a 3-day, you know, each member of the staff to take a 3-day break each month, or every 5 or 6 weeks, right? Because you become a better coach, a more effective coach, right? And it's not the end of the world. When we think about these athletes that we're working with, if we're thinking at least in a 4-year window, if not a 40-year window, or as a club coach, an 8 to 10-year window, right? You missing 2 or 3 workouts a month is not the end of the world. It's not going to change that athlete's or that group of athletes' success significantly, especially if you've developed your staff, right? And everybody's on the same page and you have competent coaches to run that, those practices. And, you know, I think it'd be really valuable if we got into, especially for a head coach or a head age group coach, you know, that have responsibilities that go well beyond the hours that they're on pool deck, to get into the situation that, you know, college professors have, where you get a sabbatical every few years, because it can sap your energy. And having that 3-month period, you know, I've been away from USA Swimming now for 3 months, and I haven't been just sitting around eating bonbons, right? I've been doing stuff, but it's been a great, I don't know that I've ever had 3 months where I didn't, you know, I wasn't constantly go in the coaching world. And right. It's been a great opportunity for me to recharge, you know, reflect, go on some podcasts, and just have some fun and some, I guess, a little bit of normalcy.
Sure.
You know, in my life. And that's not a complaint. The coaching lifestyle is one that we choose. We know what's involved in it, but it can't be 24/7, 365.
Sure.
Not if you want to sustain it as a career.
I have a friend, a very good friend, who's a coach in California, say to me, you know, during the pandemic, I had dinner every night with my family, and it's going to stay that way. Like, I'm going to find something else. You can understand it, right? I mean, you sacrifice a lot of nights and weekends, and the travel is tough. So,
well, and we need to think about the swim family's experience, right? They had that same thing where every night they got to have dinner as a family that maybe didn't normally happen. So are there ways to, I'm not saying that we eliminate evening practices, right? Or, I mean, but is there a way to find an optimal schedule that allows a couple nights a week for families and coaches and their families to have those dinners together, and still allows the athletes to continue to develop. And I think that's one of the things I'm curious to see is, are our programs going to make adjustments to that? Are coaches going to look at some of the performances that we've seen off of an extended break or an extended period of maybe less training than what normally would have happened, and say, okay, should we be making some adjustments? You know,
Do we
and
need
I
to
don't know that
practice?
I have thoughts on that, but I don't know. I haven't, because I wasn't specifically coaching a group. I think my thoughts are more generalized on what works and what's necessary. But I think it's something that we need to look at, especially if we're going to continue to have, you know, limited numbers of people in lanes and things like that. You know, maybe there's a way to run practices in a different way and a different schedule that becomes better for the athletes, better for the coaches, and better for families all around.
That's a great point, Mark. And I was talking, I think it was Ian Murray a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about his practice schedule. It was either Ian, it was somebody, I think it was Ian. He said, we don't need to practice 2 hours right now. We're going 90 minutes, and it's some great work. Maybe we don't need to go 2 hours, you know, Monday through Saturday at night. You know, maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe we can get the same performance or better on less. An interesting and curious thought, you and I talked about this a long time ago. How little training do you have to do to be super successful?
Yeah, and I don't know that we need to, you know, necessarily look only at the minimum, right? But what I think my personal opinion is, our swimming culture has always been more is better, right? If 9 practices was good, 11 practices is going to be even better, right? And Michael Phelps went 4 years or 6 years, depending on, you know, which story you believe, and he trained every single day because they figured that they got 7 more weeks of training by not taking any days off, right? Well, that's great. It worked great for Michael Phelps, right? At least in terms of his swimming performance. Maybe not with some of the other challenges he had in his life, right? And to assume that every athlete, even every fast athlete who has national or Olympic experiences, can handle the training load that Michael handled and be as successful, there aren't that many Michael Phelpses out there. And I think just because it worked for him doesn't mean it was the best plan, right? We only know in hindsight, right? If he hadn't won 8 golds in Beijing, then would we say that that plan worked and was worth it? And that's a question for Bob and Michael, you know, and Michael's, you know, important people in his life. That's for them to answer, right? It's not necessarily a model for us to emulate.
Right.
And it may be the best model for some other athletes out there.
Sure.
But probably not for everyone.
Right.
And so I think that's where we can look at it and say, how much does a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old, how much time do they need in the water to continue to improve, right? And continue to have that potential to achieve at whatever the level they want to achieve at. What is the right amount? And I think it's less than what we normally have done as a sport. I don't know how much less. And I think that's for each, that's part of the puzzle, and I wonder, and the curiosity of am I willing to try that? Right? There are teams around the country that don't let their 10 and under swimmers compete in their LSC championship because they don't think 10 and unders need a championship meet. And for some of those teams, it has been incredibly successful for them in terms of longevity in the sport for their athletes and success with their senior athletes. Certainly there are a lot of athletes that have gone through, competing at state championships since they were 7 or 8 years old, and that have stayed in the sport and been successful. So I don't think it's a one size fits all.
Right.
So it's about figuring out what works for you in your community, with your facilities, with the human resources that you have, and what you believe philosophically is best.
Right.
And what are you trying to accomplish? Is it that 40-year window? Is that your priority? If that's your priority, then coach to that priority, right? Is it winning, having the high point 10 and under every year? Then, okay, coach to that philosophy. I mean, that's fine. Right? But don't say that your goal is long-term athlete development and then, train 10 and unders 7 times a week, or, 14 hours a week, or whatever it is.
Right.
And that's, I guess it's one of the beauties of our American system is we get to choose as coaches or as people that run teams what we want to emphasize.
Sure.
And I think it's just important to be true to what you believe.
Right. One of the questions, Mark, that I wanted to ask you today was, can you learn to be a better learner?
Come on, Mike. Growth mindset, you can learn to be anything, right?
There it is.
I think our potential is unlimited, right? And yeah, you can learn to be a learner. I think you just have to be willing to ask questions, right? And ask enough questions to figure out what are the right questions and what are the, what questions don't really matter.
Right.
So what are the important questions to ask? And I think always be looking for that gap. I mean, we've never had a coach put all 52 members on an Olympic team, right? So nobody's got it perfectly figured out.
Right.
I don't know if that's the ultimate goal in our sport, right? I think when Coach Reese had 6 out of 8 finalists in the 100 fly at the NCAA's, I mean, that's pretty close to perfect in some ways, but there's always that gap, right? And I don't think we know what anybody's potential is. We have a vision of what people can be, and we want to coach to that. So, the origin of the word coach is from the old coach, carriage in the in the Middle Ages, right? Which was to move somebody from where they are to where they want to be, right? And that's what we're doing. We're helping them move from where they are to where they want to be, and that's our goal as a coach. So the curiosity is, what's the best way to get there?
I love it.
And do we follow the roads that we've always followed, or can we find new roads or design a new vehicle to get to that place we're trying to go to?
I love it. Mark, last question, best question in my opinion.
Uh-oh.
What role does empathy play in coaching in contemporary times?
Well, I think empathy's always played a role, right? Empathy is being able to understand and I guess share the emotions of somebody else. And I think that's that connection, right? That creates the safe space, the trusting space where an athlete can communicate who they really are, right? What their fears are, what their challenges are, what gets them excited. They have the space to be able to fail, right? One of the biggest mistakes I think we make as coaches, and I was as guilty of it as anybody else, right, is getting mad at a kid for failing, right? Whether it's in a race or in a practice, right? That means, all that means is they're pushing their envelope, right? And finding where that boundary is between what they're capable of and what they're not capable of at this moment. And that's where we want them to be. That should be like the time for celebration, right? Not the time for criticism, ridicule, and fear for the athlete, because they're not going to want to go to that boundary very often if when they go past it and they fail, all they're doing is getting criticized. Right? One of my favorite scenes from the movies is from the movie Meet the Robinsons, the Disney cartoon, where when the little guy goes into the future and he's trying to fix the peanut butter and jelly gun at the family dinner, right? And he screws it up and it sprays everybody and everything. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a horrible inventor, blah, blah, blah. And they like throw a big celebration, right? If you don't know that scene, you should look it up and Meet the Robinsons. It's probably about halfway through the movie. And it's like failure is the pathway, right? The obstacle is the way. And the tagline from that, it's a quote from Walt Disney, is, keep moving forward.
Fail forward.
We've got to keep moving forward. That's the key to me in swimming, right? That's the goal. Do things that move you forward. Don't do things that keep you from moving forward when we're trying to go down the pool. But it's also the key in life, right? We've got to take our mistakes and learn from them. And then, be curious about why the mistake happened. Be curious about what needs to change to get to the next place. So to me, empathy creates the space for failure. And that's one of our biggest responsibilities as coaches. And something that if you'd asked me 15 years ago, if you had said that to me 15 years ago, I'm not sure I would have understood it. But now that I've been doing this for as long as I've been doing it, I've finally, I guess, figured it out. So
fail forward, man.
Yep.
I love it. And these are the rapid fire questions, Mark, and I know because I know you. You're not gonna like these. And you're gonna the first thing I think you're gonna say to me is, Mike, why does this even matter? But does it take a sub 21 second performance in Tokyo to win the 50?
I have no idea.
Exactly.
I have no idea.
Right.
It wouldn't surprise me if it did, but it also wouldn't surprise me if it didn't, to be honest with you. Sure, it takes a sub 21.
Does more than one athlete break 8 minutes in the women's 800?
No.
Okay. All right. Does the one who shall not be named break 8 minutes?
I think she's capable of it. You know, I don't know. It's all speculation, right? If I was on deck every day coaching that person, I'd probably be able to give you a lot better answer on the likelihood of it. I think the potential is there. She's shown us that the potential is there. And, you know, maybe I'm going against my my thoughts on this to say 2 people won't, but I don't know that anybody else has shown that's in their wheelhouse right now. But I'm not on deck with these athletes. I think anything is possible.
One thing you mentioned to me the other day, and I put it in the quick fire so that you couldn't see it and prepare for it. Coach Salo said we need to be creating a capacity for efficiency at the age group level instead of focusing on capacity for aerobic training. Do we come out of this pandemic with a better understanding of the significance of an aerobic background or an aerobic capacity?
Or the insignificance of it? I hope that coaches are looking at their training and kind of assessing what the time off means. And I think it's different in every situation because you've got to look at what the athletes were able to do on their own, right? And when and what you were able to offer as a club. But I think this does give us pause to look at what exactly works in training, and maybe some things that we used to think are important that aren't important. I love the idea of building an efficiency base for our younger athletes. Their skill development, their understanding of movement development has to be key in those early years, whether that's from 5 to 10 or 5 to 12 or where the shift happens. I think again is a matter of personal opinion. But I agree with Coach Salo that our age group athletes should be focusing on an efficiency base, being able to swim at speeds with fewer strokes, to be able to do things like underwater travel effectively, so that as their bodies mature, then you layer physical capability on that efficient vessel, efficient operating system, and then I think you see amazing things, amazing potential. So setting that foundation is so very, very important to me.
I love
it. I think everybody's got to look at their training and say, what's necessary, right? This is forcing us to be smarter about our training. What's necessary, and what will be the things that I'll add in as I get maybe more time in the pool.
Right.
But what are the most important things? We as swim coaches sometimes are not good at prioritizing, which is why we think more is better, because that gives us greater margin for error, right?
The patience part, another great Mark Hesse quote. Mark Hesse's quote is, "I'm always worried about the almighty fast swim."
Yeah, so we've got to be patiently unsatisfied. So always hungry to get better, the idea of growth, but we have to understand that growth takes time, right? And I think a mistake that we make is that a lot of teams make is over racing, right? When you race every weekend, where's the opportunity to get better, right? Or even every other weekend is maybe too much. I don't know. I don't know what the right balance is, but those of us that have been involved in high school swimming has all seen the athlete who, for one reason or another, just swims the same event over and over and over again, right? And it just gets stale because all they're doing is grooving in that specific pattern of performance.
Right.
And there's not the opportunity for change and improvement to happen. And I think that's one of the reasons we see kids swim faster is that right now is that racing is fresh and new to them, right? And they've had the opportunity to maybe forget some of the errors or preconceived or kind of the input they've had through their career on how to swim a race, what it's going to feel like. It's kind of fresh and new, right? So maybe they try something different, right? Whether it's consciously or unconsciously. And that's why we're seeing these improvements. So patience is important. It's really hard. And there's a fine line between having the patience to wait for the corn to grow, right? And while you're being hungry, right? Because we're hungry, but we can't eat the corn till the corn's ripe, right? And if you look at it in that way as a gardener or a farmer, we have to have patience.
I love it. And Mark, last question.
Okay.
Georgetown Hoyas, Final Four 2021, if there's a season.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I haven't looked at anything about college basketball. I would love to see the Hoyas get back into that level of Final Four. I think Coach Ewing's got the ability to do that. But heck, predicting college basketball is as much a crapshoot as predicting swim times in Tokyo.
No doubt about it.
Right?
Mark, thanks so much for your time today. I knew we'd go over that hour. I knew we'd power through that. So I really appreciate your time. And also really incredibly thankful for you and the role that you've played in my personal and professional development. It's been a huge help. And for the role you've played in our athletes at Victor and the development over the years. We've had such a great relationship with you and USA Swimming. So we're so thankful for that. And we're thankful from Fitter and Faster to have you on the program today. So thanks so much.
Well, thanks, Mike. It was a blast. Thanks for all the difficult questions. And glad to do it. And if anybody wants to talk to me about anything I said, feel free to reach out.
Mark, how can people get in touch with you?
So Facebook, I think is Mark Hesse, just Twitter at Coach Hesse. My email is mhesse61@gmail. And then phone number, I'm glad to give that out. It's 719-645-9285. And I'm on Mountain Time. So when it's 8 o'clock in the East, I'm just getting up. So just remember that when you call.
Mark, great to see you, man. Best of luck and
Thanks,
best
Mike.
wishes to you the rest of this year. And Hope you guys in Colorado are getting opened up soon and getting back to business, but not too soon. We all want to be patient and make sure everybody's happy and healthy.
Yeah, stay healthy out there, everyone. And I think that's, yeah, just be careful.
We're in it together. All right, Mark, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much. And everybody, you can get the replay of this webinar on our website at www.fitterandfaster.com. You can go to the Coach's Corner blog page and review all of the replays, as well as the best of clips that's coming out sometime later this week. So keep your eyes open for that. Thanks again, Mark. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Mike.